He was a battle-worn Marine turned biker, chasing peace on the lonely roads of Arizona. But one scorching afternoon, he found something that burned deeper than the desert sun. A police officer hanging from a tree, and her loyal German shepherd left for dead beneath her. A note pinned to the bark read, "Interfere, and you'll hang beside them." What began as one man's escape from war became a fight against a darkness far greater than the battlefield. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moves your heart, please subscribe for more tales of courage and redemption. The heat in Prescott Valley, Arizona, had a way of pressing down on everything alive. It wasn't just temperature, it was weight, a constant, invisible force that filled the lungs with dust and the bones with fatigue. Even the wind, when it came, carried a dry hiss that scoured the skin like sandpaper. Ethan "Hawk" Grayson rode through it all as if he belonged to it. His Harley-Davidson Shovelhead 1972 rumbled beneath him, an old machine that, like its owner, refused to die. The sound of the engine was low and even, the pulse of a man who had spent too long in war to ever feel at home in silence. He was in his late 40s, built from years of endurance rather than vanity, broad shoulders, a lean frame, and arms corded with muscle that had never forgotten how to carry a rifle. His hair, once black, was now streaked with grey and tied back at the nape. His beard was trimmed short, his skin tanned to the shade of worn leather. The only softness left in him was in his eyes, grey-blue, steady and heavy with the memory of those who never came home. He had served 18 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the streets of Fallujah. In the end, it wasn't shrapnel that drove him out, it was guilt. A convoy ambush, a bad call, and 3 names carved into stone. Since then, he'd chased quiet the way others chased salvation. Now, he lived alone in a wooden cabin at the edge of the Bradshaw Mountains, where pine needles collected on the roof and coyotes howled at night. He fixed engines for locals when they asked, and no one asked much about his past. Out here, a man's silence was respected more than his story. That afternoon, the desert sky was a faded blue, so bright it hurt to look at. Ethan's t-shirt clung to his back with sweat. He had ridden into town early that morning for supplies, coffee, canned beans, motor oil, and now he was headed home before the storm of heat reached its peak. The Harley rolled down the dirt track, kicking up a long tail of red dust behind it. The air smelled of pine sap, gasoline, and the faint metallic tang of heat. Ethan felt the road hum through the soles of his boots and, for a moment, believed that just this, was peace. But peace never lasted long in a soldier's life. As the road curved near a dried creek bed, he noticed something wrong. A white police cruiser sat half-hidden behind a clump of juniper trees, its door wide open. The sun flashed off its side mirror like a distress signal. Ethan slowed, instinct tugging at him. The engine dropped to a low idle as he coasted to a stop. He removed his sunglasses, eyes narrowing. The cruiser's engine was off, but the radio crackled faintly, a static whisper carried by the wind. "Prescott County Unit 4 to 9. Do you copy?" "Repeat, Unit 4 to 9. No reply. Ethan waited, listening. The cicadas had gone silent. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. His pulse slowed, his mind shifting gears into an old familiar mode, the one that had kept him alive in war zones. He swung a leg off the Harley, the creak of his boots unnaturally loud. His gaze swept the area. No movement, no birds, no breeze, just stillness thick enough to choke on. He approached the cruiser. The driver's seat was empty. A thermos lay on its side, a small pool of coffee drying on the floorboard. A clipboard had fallen under the pedals. He crouched, scanning the dirt beside the car footprints, several sets, overlapping. One set heavier, dragging slightly, another smaller, sharper military or tactical boots. A faint stain marked the gravel near the trunk. Blood, already turning brown. "Son of a bitch," he muttered under his breath. Old instincts pushed him forward. He followed the prints off the road and into the tree line, where the ground was shaded and cooler. The smell hit him before he saw anything copper and sweat mingled with pine resin. He moved quietly, the way Marines did when the world was watching them. About 40 yards in, the forest opened into a small clearing, the sunlight pouring down like molten gold through the branches. At first, he thought it was a broken branch swaying in the heat, haze. Then the shape became clear. His body went cold. A man hung upside down from a pine limb, ankles bound tightly with thick nylon cord. His uniform shirt, dark blue and torn, identified him as a Prescott County police officer. The name tag read Brooks. His face was swollen, blood streaking down his forehead, and his arms hung limply toward the ground. Below him lay a German shepherd, tied with electric wire, its ribs rising and falling in shallow, desperate rhythm. The dog's fur was mottled with dirt and sweat, one ear bloodied. Its eyes flicked up weakly toward Ethan, a look that wasn't fear, but pleading. Pinned to the tree trunk beside them was a sheet of paper, fluttering slightly in the hot wind. The handwriting was jagged, furious, done with a thick black marker. Anyone who interferes will hang next. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. The world around him blurred, and all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. The cicadas had gone silent again. Even the air felt heavy, as though the desert itself were holding its breath. He stepped closer, the gravel crunching softly beneath his boots. The man hanging before him couldn't have been older than 30. His badge glinted faintly in the sun. There was still life there, barely. The German shepherd gave a weak, broken sound, somewhere between a whine and a growl. Ethan looked from the dog to the note, then back to the officer. His jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of cruelty before, half a world away, in a war no one wanted to remember. He'd left that life behind, built walls of solitude and distance to keep it buried. But standing in that clearing, with the smell of blood and fear mixing in the summer air, he felt the old world clawing its way back to the surface. He knew what this was, a message. Someone had made an example out of a cop and his K9 partner, and they'd done it close enough to town that someone like him would find it. It wasn't random. It was a warning. For a long time, Ethan just stood there, staring. His breathing steadied, his mind sharpening to the same deadly calm it had known on the battlefield. The part of him that had been sleeping, the part trained to survive, was awake again. He reached for the knife on his belt, but stopped halfway. Saving them would mean calling attention, breaking the isolation he'd spent years protecting. It would mean stepping back into a world of guns and orders and ghosts. The shepherd made a sound again, a faint, trembling whine. Ethan closed his eyes. Peace, he realized, was a lie. When he opened them, the war was back in his gaze. The stillness of the forest seemed to vanish as the words on the note burned into his mind. Anyone who interferes will hang next. And Ethan, Hawk Grayson, understood, with the clarity of a man who had cheated death too many times, that the quiet life he had built was over. The battle he had run from had finally found him again. The ride back to the cabin was a blur of heat, sweat, and noise. The Harley groaned against the rough trail, its wheels biting into loose rock and dust as Ethan leaned forward, coaxing the old machine up the incline. The unconscious officer's body swayed lightly in the sidecar, the German shepherd curled against his legs. The air smelled of pine and gasoline, heavy with the scent of blood beginning to dry. By the time the cabin came into view, a squat shape of wood and stone pressed against the trees, the sun had slipped behind the ridge. The air cooled, but Ethan's skin burned from the weight of the day. He parked the Harley near the porch and shut off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Inside, the cabin was dim but orderly. A cot, a table, a stack of old Marine Corps manuals, a faded photograph of men in desert fatigues. Ethan carried the officer inside, laying him gently on the cot. The shepherd followed, dragging its injured leg, but refusing to leave its partner's side. Ethan moved quickly. He fetched his medical kit, a battered olive-green case with the faded stenciling USMC Field Aid. He'd sworn he'd never need it again. Now it felt like the only thing tethering him to his training instead of panic. He checked the officer's pulse, faint but there. He cleaned the worst of the blood with iodine and gauze, stitched 2 shallow cuts on the shoulder, and wrapped the bruised ribs. The man was young, maybe early 30s, with short blonde hair and the lean build of someone used to running toward danger instead of away from it. The dog whimpered, its amber eyes locked on Ethan's every movement. Its breathing was fast and shallow. "Easy, soldier," Ethan muttered, reaching out a steady hand. The shepherd hesitated, then pressed its muzzle into his palm. The animal's fur was matted with blood and dust. Ethan found the source a deep gash near its flank. He cleaned it and dressed it with strips of cloth. The work steadied him. He moved like a machine, efficient and calm, until his hands began to tremble not from fear, but from memory. The smell of antiseptic, the sound of shallow breathing, it was all too familiar. For a moment, the cabin was gone, and he was back in a tent in Helmand Province, trying to keep a 19-year-old corporal alive. A sharp knock on the door broke the spell. Ethan froze, hand instinctively going to the pistol on his hip. "Who's there?" "It's Claire Mitchell," a voice called, clear and strong despite the distance. "Ranger service, you home, Hawk?" Ethan exhaled. Claire. He opened the door to find her standing on the porch, hands on her hips, the twilight outlining her like a figure cut from amber. Claire Mitchell, 32, wore her ranger uniform like armor-tan shirt, rolled at the sleeves, dark green pants tucked into scuffed boots. Her skin carried the bronze tone of someone who lived in the sun, and her hair, the color of chestnuts, was tied back in a long braid. Her eyes were sharp hazel, the kind that saw through excuses. Ethan had known her for 2 years, mostly through the kind of quiet friendship built on shared favors. She had once brought him a broken Ranger Jeep to fix. He'd once pulled her truck out of a ditch during a snowstorm. They didn't talk much, but there was respect between them. "You look like hell," she said, scanning him from head to toe. "You should see the other guy," Ethan muttered. Her gaze drifted past him to the inside of the cabin. "You've got company." Ethan stepped aside. Found them out near the old fire road, officer and his K9 partner. Both barely breathing. Claire moved instantly, years of wilderness rescue instinct taking over. She crouched beside the cot, checking the officer's vitals with practiced precision. "Pulses weak. He's dehydrated. We'll need fluids." She looked up at Ethan. "You've still got that IV kit from your Marine days?" He nodded, already pulling open a drawer. She set to work, disinfecting her hands with a small bottle from her belt pack. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing," she murmured, noting the clean, professional knots on the officer's wrists. "This wasn't random." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "There was a note." She glanced up. "What kind of note?" "The kind that says I should have kept driving." For a while, the only sounds were the soft hiss of the IV drip and the rhythmic crackle of the wood stove. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and pine smoke. The shepherd Rex, according to the officer's badge tag, lifted his head once, whining softly toward the man on the cot. "He's loyal," Claire said softly, stroking the dog's ear. "Loyalty gets you killed," Ethan replied. She gave him a look. "Didn't stop you from dragging them out of the woods?" He didn't answer. Hours passed. The officer's breathing steadied, his pulse growing stronger. Claire wiped her hands and leaned against the table. "He's stable for now. We'll have to see if he wakes up." Ethan poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed her one. "You think this is connected to that warehouse raid you mentioned last month?" "Maybe," she said. "D has been sniffing around Prescott County. Rumor is there's a new player moving product through the mountain roads. Calls themselves the Crimson Serpents." Ethan frowned. Sounds theatrical for drug runners. They're not small time, Claire said. Military-grade weapons, cross-state supply lines. Someone high up is protecting them. Every time law enforcement gets close, the targets vanish, like clockwork. The words settled between them like smoke. Then from the cot, a low groan. The officer stirred, eyes flickering open to the glow of the firelight. He blinked, confused, then tried to sit up, grimacing in pain. "Easy," Claire said, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "You're safe. You're at a cabin off Bradshaw Ridge." The man's gaze darted between them, his throat working before sound came. "Where's Rex?" The shepherd gave a soft bark, tail thumping once. The man exhaled, eyes closing in relief. Ethan stepped forward. "Name's Hawk. Found you hanging out there. You remember what happened?" The officer swallowed hard. "Brooks, Tyler Brooks, Prescott PD, or I was." His voice was hoarse, cracked from thirst. "I'm not supposed to be found." Ethan and Claire exchanged a glance. "Go on," Ethan said. "I'm not just a cop," Tyler continued weakly. "I've been undercover, investigating a trafficking ring, Crimson Serpents. Guns, drugs, money, all running through our county. They've got people everywhere. Cops, deputies, even higher." He paused, chest heaving. "Every op I planned got blown before it started. Someone's feeding them intel, someone inside." Claire's brow furrowed. "You're saying there's a leak in the department?" "Not a leak," Tyler rasped. "A damn pipeline." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "That why they tried to hang you?" Tyler nodded slowly. "I got close to something big. A warehouse near the old mine road. Names, drop points. I had proof. Then they came for me before I could send it. They wanted the evidence." He coughed, wincing. "Didn't get it." Ethan leaned against the table, arms folded. "So now they'll come back to finish the job." Claire looked from Ethan to Tyler. "We need to call the sheriff's office." "No," Tyler cut her off sharply, his voice stronger now. "You call anyone, and they'll know I'm alive. You don't know who's clean." The room fell silent again. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Finally, Claire spoke. "Then we keep him here until he can move. I can bring supplies in the morning." Ethan hesitated, looking at the officer, then at the dog, curled protectively against his leg. Rex gave a faint whine, as if pleading for trust. "Fine," Ethan said at last. "But you both stay quiet. No phones, no calls. Whoever's behind this won't stop." Claire nodded. "We'll figure it out, Hawk, together." Ethan turned toward the window. The night outside was black and vast, filled with the whisper of danger that felt too familiar. He had spent years trying to forget the feeling of waiting for an ambush. Now it was back sharper than ever. He looked back at the injured man and the loyal dog watching over him. Something in Ethan's chest shifted, a dull ache he hadn't felt since the war. Maybe peace wasn't meant for men like him. Maybe purpose was all that was left. The morning air over Bradshaw Ridge was still cool when the first hint of sunlight brushed the tops of the pines. Ethan stood outside the cabin, his hands resting on the railing, eyes scanning the line where forest met sky. It had been 2 days since he'd found Tyler and Rex in the woods, and though both were recovering, he hadn't slept more than a few hours. Something about the quiet unsettled him now. It wasn't peace, it was anticipation. Behind him, the creak of the cabin door announced movement. Claire stepped out, hair pulled into a loose braid, fatigue etched beneath her sharp hazel eyes. She wore her ranger jacket over a plain grey t-shirt, her sidearm holstered and ready. "He's awake again," she said, voice low. "And asking for you." Ethan nodded, stepping back inside. The cabin smelled of coffee, antiseptic, and wood smoke. Tyler Brooks sat propped on the cot, color slowly returning to his face. The bruises had faded from deep violet to an ugly yellow, and the bandages on his ribs were clean. He looked younger now that the pain had softened his features, a man who still had something to fight for. Rex lay on the rug beside him, his head resting on his paws. The German shepherd's fur had regained some of its sheen, the wound on his flank wrapped neatly in gauze. When Ethan entered, the dog's ears perked up, tail thumping once against the floor. "Good boy," Ethan murmured, crouching to scratch behind his ear. Rex leaned into the touch, eyes half closed with contentment. Tyler looked up. "He hasn't left my side since I woke up." His voice was still rough, but steadier than before. "Guess loyalty isn't something you can beat out of him." Ethan gave a faint smile. "That makes two of you." Claire moved to the small table and unfolded a local map, its edges frayed and marked with faded ranger notations. "We've got a problem," she said, tapping near the eastern edge of the forest. "Last night I heard engines, heavy ones, probably trucks, too far off-road for tourists. If they were moving freight, it wasn't legal." Tyler leaned forward, wincing slightly. "That fits. The Serpents have been using off-grid routes, back roads and service trails that cut through federal land. I tracked them once before they hit me. Their main drop point should be near Route 89. Ethan studied the map. "How far?" 10 miles as the crow flies," Claire said. 6 if you don't mind hiking through hell." Ethan looked at Tyler. "You up for that?" Tyler's jaw clenched. "If I sit here any longer, I'll go insane." A few hours later, they were on the move. Claire led the way, her ranger instincts keeping them off the main trails. Ethan carried a canvas pack filled with water, rations, and a small first-aid kit. Tyler walked slower, his limp still noticeable, but determination kept him steady. Rex trotted ahead, nose to the ground, tail swishing. The deeper they went, the thicker the forest grew, sunlight slanting through in narrow golden shafts. Birdsong echoed distantly, but beneath it was another sound, a faint mechanical hum. It was Rex who caught it first. The shepherd froze, ears pricked, then began pacing in tight circles near a patch of flattened brush. He sniffed the ground, nose twitching rapidly. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Ethan asked, crouching beside him. He followed the dog's gaze and saw it a faint track of tire impressions pressed into the dirt. They weren't from a normal vehicle. The treads were wide and heavy, industrial grade, the kind used for military transport. Claire knelt next to them, running her hand along the grooves. "These came through last night. No rain since then. 4, maybe 5 vehicles. Big ones." Rex moved ahead, pulling them along the trail. The air grew sharper, tinged with something acrid. Ethan recognized it instantly, a faint chemical stench that clung to the back of Tans, the throat. "You smell that?" Tyler nodded grimly. "Ammonium base. Used in fentanyl synthesis, they're cooking it somewhere close." They followed Rex down a steep incline until the trees thinned, revealing a clearing choked with weeds and rusted fencing. At its center stood a corrugated metal structure, an old storage warehouse, half hidden behind a row of dead pines. A weathered sign hung crooked on the gate, "Prescott Feed and Farm Equipment, closed." Claire whispered. "I thought this place was condemned years ago." Ethan crouched behind a fallen log, scanning the perimeter through a pair of old binoculars. The doors were padlocked, but the chain was new. No guards in sight, no vehicles, only silence. "Looks abandoned," he said. "But the locks aren't." Tyler's face hardened. "This is it. I remember that logo. They used it as a front. Let's move carefully." They approached from the side, sticking close to the shadows. The padlock gave way under Ethan's knife with a quiet snap. The metal door creaked as he eased it open just enough for them to slip inside. The air within was colder, thick with the smell of oil, gunpowder, and something bitterly sweet. Wooden crates were stacked floor to ceiling, each stenciled with "Farm Equipment, Prescott Supply Co." Ethan pried one open with the knife. Inside were neat rows of sealed plastic bricks, white powder, vacuum-packed and stamped with Serpent insignias. Beneath those, wrapped in oilcloth, lay magazines of 5.56 millimeters ammunition. Claire exhaled slowly. Jesus, that's not just drugs. That's enough ammo to start a war. Tyler examined a nearby crate. They're using legitimate supply lines, state shipments, agricultural permits to move product. No one questions farm gear in this part of the country. On the concrete floor, something caught Ethan's eye. A small rectangular piece of plastic, half buried in dust. He picked it up and wiped it clean. A security badge. The photo was slightly smudged, but the name printed below was clear. Lieutenant Mark Daniels, Prescott County Sheriff's Office. Tyler froze when he saw it. Daniels, he's my commanding officer, the one who approved my undercover clearance. Claire frowned. You're saying your own lieutenant's part of this? Tyler's voice was cold. I'm saying he's the only one who could have leaked my op. He knew where I was meeting the informant that night. No one else did. Ethan turned the badge over in his hand. The magnetic strip was scratched but intact. This isn't just corruption, he said quietly. It's coordination. He's running point for them. Claire's jaw tightened. It gets worse. I've seen unmarked military trucks on the preserve roads. No registration, no ranger permits, always after dark. I thought it was contractors. Now I'm not so sure. Ethan looked around at the stacks of contraband, the silent testimony of betrayal. You both realize what this means? This isn't just about drugs, it's about control. Someone's building an empire under the badge of law. Tyler stared at the floor, fists clenching. Daniels always preached loyalty and order, said the world was rotten, that men like us were wasting our time chasing the small fry. Maybe this is what he meant, control through power. Ethan's voice was grim. That's not order. That's rot, wearing a uniform. A faint noise interrupted them, the sound of gravel crunching outside. Claire moved to the door, peeking through the narrow crack. A pickup truck had just pulled up, 2 men climbing out. They wore plain clothes, but both carried rifles. We've got company, she whispered. Ethan gestured toward the back. Storage ramp, now. They slipped out the rear exit just as the warehouse door opened. The men's voices echoed faintly inside. Check the south crates. The lieutenant wants confirmation before the side. Next run. The trio crouched behind a rusted trailer, hearts pounding. Rex pressed against Ethan's leg, silent but alert. After several tense minutes, the sound of the truck receded down the dirt road. Claire let out a slow breath. We can't stay here. If Daniels is involved, he'll know we've found this place. Tyler picked up the security badge from Ethan's hand. Then we hit first. We expose him. But we'll need proof, real proof. Ethan nodded. We'll take photos, document everything, then burn the rest. Claire gave a grim smile. Burning evidence isn't exactly regulation. Neither is hanging cops from trees, Ethan replied. When they finally left, the sun was already sinking behind the hills, painting the forest in molten orange. The badge gleamed in Tyler's palm as they walked, small, cold, and heavy with betrayal. The first piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. The desert sky had gone black by the time the first engine roared to life somewhere beyond the ridge. The cabin sat quiet in its hollow of trees, its windows shuttered, a soft orange glow flickering from within. Ethan sat at the table, cleaning his shotgun with the same slow, deliberate precision he'd used in combat years ago. Every scrape of the rag against the metal echoed through the small wooden room like a warning. Tyler paced near the map spread across the counter, his bandaged shoulder tight under the fabric of his borrowed shirt. If Daniels knows we've found the warehouse, he won't sit around waiting, he said. Claire leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Her ranger uniform was streaked with dirt and soot from the day's hike, her hazel eyes dim under the lantern light. You think he'll send men tonight? Ethan didn't look up. If I were him, I'd hit hard, fast, and before the law could ask why half a mountain went up in smoke. A low growl came from the corner. Rex had been restless all evening, pacing between the windows, sniffing at the air as though the forest carried something foul. The German shepherd's coat glimmered dark gold in the light, his intelligent eyes sharp. Scars from his earlier wounds were healing, but he still limped slightly. Yet tonight, there was no trace of weakness, only alertness. Ethan's instincts twitched in rhythm with the dog's. He stood, loading the last shell. "Lights out," he said quietly. Claire moved to extinguish the lanterns. The cabin sank into darkness. For a few moments, there was nothing but silence, the kind that presses against your ears until it hurts. Then, the faint pop of gravel under tires. Another, closer. "They're here," Ethan murmured. Through the narrow gap of the curtain, he saw the shimmer of headlights crawling up the forest road. Not one, but several. Trucks black, unmarked, engines low and mean. Shadows spilled from them like oil. Men with rifles. Tyler drew his pistol. "They've got numbers." Ethan's face was calm, almost too calm. "They always do." He crossed the room, lifted a section of the floorboards, and revealed a steel hatch built into the cabin foundation. Beneath it, a narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. "Claire, get Brooks and the dog below. You'll find a generator light down there, food, ammo. Go." "What about you?" she asked. Ethan's gaze was steady. "I'll buy time." Claire hesitated, then nodded. She guided Tyler toward the hatch, but the younger man shook his head. "Not a chance. I can still shoot." "You can barely breathe," Ethan replied. "You're no good to anyone dead." Before Tyler could argue again, the first gunfire shattered the night. Bullets tore through the front window, splintering the wooden frame. Rex barked, sharp and furious, standing in front of Tyler like a wall of muscle and loyalty. Ethan grabbed Claire's arm, pushing her toward the hatch. "Go. Now." The next moment, a firebomb exploded against the outer wall. The cabin shook as flames raced up the siding, their light staining the forest blood red. Smoke poured in through the cracks, thick and bitter. Ethan ducked behind the table, returning fire through the shattered window. His shotgun thundered once, twice, each blast echoed by a scream in the dark. "Downstairs!" he shouted again. Claire pulled Tyler through the hatch, Rex following close behind. The dog hesitated, looking back once, ears pinned flat, before disappearing below. When the last of them was safe, Ethan yanked the hatch shut and kicked the table over it for cover. He reloaded, then slipped out the back door into the forest. The fire had already leapt from tree to tree, casting the night in shades of hellish orange. The attackers moved in formation, professional and silent. Their leader, a tall man in a black tactical vest, barked orders through a headset. His name was Mason Rudd, mid-30s, shaved head, face pitted from old burns. He was a hired mercenary, ex-border patrol gone rogue after a smuggling scandal. His reputation was simple. He never left survivors. Ethan circled wide through the trees, the heat prickling against his neck. He could feel the old muscle memory kicking in, breath steady, steps silent, mind cold. War had returned to him like a language he'd never forgotten. Down below, Claire and Tyler crouched in the narrow bunker lit by a single bulb. Concrete walls surrounded them, the air cool and dry. "He built this for real," Tyler said, astonished. "Old soldiers plan for storms that never end," Claire murmured. She checked her rifle, eyes sharp despite the tremor in her hands. "Stay low. If he signals, we move." Rex sat near the stairs, hackles raised, his nose twitching. Suddenly, he stiffened, then growled a low, rolling sound. Above them, heavy boots thudded across the floorboards. Then, silence. Up in the chaos, Ethan had reached a ridge overlooking the burning cabin. He could see the mercenaries advancing through the firelight, their shapes flickering like demons. He counted 6, maybe 7. Rudd was near the front, rifle raised, shouting, "Sweep the house! I want that cop's body confirmed." Ethan smiled grimly. "Come and find out." He moved along the ridge, taking position behind a fallen log. His first shot cracked through the air, dropping a man instantly. Before the others could react, a second shot hit another in the shoulder. The forest erupted into gunfire. Down in the bunker, Tyler strained to hear over the roar of bullets and flames. "He's outnumbered," Claire shook her head. "He's been outnumbered before." The door above rattled violently, then burst open. A man in dark clothing stumbled halfway down the stairs before Rex lunged. The shepherd hit with bone-shaking force, jaws locking around the man's arm. The scream that followed was raw and short. Claire raised her pistol and fired once, clean and precise. The man went still. Rex released his grip, panting, blood dripping from his muzzle. Claire knelt beside him, whispering, "Good boy. You did good." Back above, the fire reached the cabin roof. The flames roared, swallowing everything in orange light. Rudd cursed, waving his men back toward the tree line. "Find that bastard!" Ethan's answer came in the form of another shotgun blast. A spray of dirt exploded inches from Rudd's feet. The mercenary spun and fired into the shadows, muzzle flashes lighting his scarred face. "You think you can hide, old man?" he shouted. "I don't hide." Ethan's voice came back, cold and even. "I hunt." Rudd barely had time to turn before Ethan tackled him. They crashed into the dirt, grappling amid sparks and smoke. The mercenary swung hard, but Ethan's counterpunch caught him square across the jaw. The fight was brutal, primal, two men carved from the same violent clay. Finally, Ethan drove the butt of his shotgun into Rudd's temple. The mercenary slumped, unconscious. The forest had gone eerily still again, save for the crackling of fire. When Claire and Tyler emerged from the bunker minutes later, the cabin was little more than a glowing skeleton. Ethan stood near the flames, one hand gripping Rudd's collar. Rex limped up beside him, tail wagging weakly. Tyler stared at the captured man. "Who sent you?" Rudd's eyes flickered open, blood trickling down his forehead. He spat into the dirt. "Daniels said to clean up the mess you made." Claire crouched down, voice calm but deadly. "And who's his boss?" The mercenary laughed, a wet, broken sound. "You don't even know what you're in." Daniels answers to Kane Ross. "You can burn one snake, but the nest is endless." Ethan's eyes darkened. "Then we start burning the nest." He glanced at the cabin ashes now, smoke rising into the black sky. For a moment, he thought of all the nights he'd spent here believing he'd found peace. That illusion was gone, devoured by the flames. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was war again, one that stretched beyond the mountains, into the deserts, into the heart of everything he'd once sworn to protect. The dawn that broke over Prescott Valley came soft and colorless, streaking the sky with muted pink and gray. The world looked calm, as if it didn't know the war that would unfold before noon. Ethan stood by the wreckage of what had once been his cabin, the smell of smoke still clinging to the earth. The night's fire had left the woods blackened and silent, but his mind was sharp, already moving ahead. He'd spent too many years surviving ambushes not to recognize the rhythm of fate when it called for another fight. Tyler Brooks sat on the back of an unmarked SUV, his face pale under the early light, one arm still bandaged. He had changed into tactical gear borrowed from Claire, black vest, utility belt, pistol holstered tight at his ribs. His expression was grim, but alive in a way it hadn't been since Ethan found him hanging in the woods. Beside him, Rex paced restlessly, tail stiff, ears up. The shepherd was fully recovered now, his coat thick and gleaming bronze, his muscles taut with restrained energy. Across the clearing, Claire Mitchell spoke quietly into a secure radio. She looked more soldier than ranger now, her uniform replaced with khaki tactical gear and a headset. The morning wind pulled at the braid falling over her shoulder. "Aaron says he's 5 minutes out," she said, glancing toward Tyler. "You ready to meet your brother?" Tyler gave a small, crooked smile. "Depends which version of him shows up. The agent or the man who used to fix my bike when we were kids." Claire returned the faintest smile before turning as a new convoy rolled up the dirt road, two black DEA trucks and a silver Suburban, dust swirling behind them. From the passenger side stepped Aaron Brooks, early 40s, with the kind of posture that came from years in law enforcement. He was taller than Tyler, his frame lean and disciplined, the lines around his eyes cut deep from both laughter and sleepless nights. His hair was dark brown, streaked with silver, and his neatly trimmed beard framed a face that was calm but unreadable. He removed his sunglasses, scanning the group before locking eyes with his brother. For a moment, the hardened agent's expression softened. "Jesus, Ty," he said quietly, walking forward. "When I heard you were dead—" Tyler cut him off with a half-smile. "Not yet, thanks to him." He gestured toward Ethan. Aaron turned, studying the man in front of him. Ethan Hawke. Grayson looked like a relic from another war, tall, sun-browned, hair graying at the temples, eyes that saw too much. He wore a black leather jacket scarred by smoke and dust. Aaron extended a hand. "I've read about men like you," he said. "Didn't think I'd meet one still walking around." Ethan shook it once, firm. "I'm not much for reading material." Claire hid a grin. "He's not much for small talk either." Aaron opened a folder and spread a map on the hood of his truck. "All right, here's what we've got. The Serpents are moving another shipment, arms and powder, same setup as the warehouse. Our inside source confirmed Kane Ross himself will be present. Daniels will be his escort." Tyler leaned in. "Ross never shows up personally." "He will this time," Aaron replied. "We leaked intel through one of Daniels' channels that a rival gang sold him out. He's moving the product early through Coyote Canyon." He tapped the map, where a thin red line wound through jagged terrain. "Single entry point, 2-mile stretch, one exit, perfect kill box." Ethan studied the terrain. "Too perfect. If they suspect a trap, they'll bring heavy fire." Aaron nodded. "That's why I need you on Overwatch. High ridge here." He pointed to a cliff overlooking the canyon's mouth. "You'll signal when the convoy enters. My team will block the exit with armored vehicles. Claire, you'll coordinate ground response with Unit Bravo here." Claire adjusted her earpiece. "Copy that." Tyler's eyes hardened. "And me?" Aaron hesitated. "You stay back until we secure Ross. You've been through enough." Tyler's reply was ice cold. "You didn't find me strung up from a tree, Aaron. I finished what I started." The older brother studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Fine. You ride with Claire, but you follow her orders, understood?" Tyler nodded. Rex gave a single bark, as if agreeing. By mid-morning, the team was in position. The canyon was a labyrinth of red stone and narrow cliffs, carved by wind and time into a natural fortress. The only sounds were wind and the faint rustle of dry brush. Ethan lay prone on the ridge, scope glinting faintly in the sun. Through it, he could see the stretch of dirt road that wound into the canyon. Down below, Claire and Tyler crouched behind a rocky outcrop beside a DEA van. The air was tense, every man and woman on the comms line silent, waiting. Rex sat alert beside Tyler, his nose twitching at the faint scent of fuel in the air. At 10:07 a.m., Ethan's voice came through the radio. "Convoy sighted. 4 vehicles, maybe 5. 2 pickups, a box truck, and an SUV. "Visual confirmed," Claire responded. "All units hold fire until my mark." Dust rose from the canyon floor as the convoy approached. Through the scope, Ethan caught sight of Kane Ross for the first time. The man was built like a bull, broad shoulders, thick neck, and a face carved from arrogance. His black suit looked out of place against the red dust, his eyes hidden behind tinted aviators. Sitting beside him was Lieutenant Mark Daniels, uniform pressed, expression tight. Fear radiated from him, despite the outward calm. Ethan exhaled slowly. "They're in the open." Aaron's voice crackled in his earpiece. "All units, mark." The world erupted. From both ends of the canyon, engines roared as DEA trucks sealed the exits. Gunfire shattered the silence, echoing between the cliffs. Ross's men scrambled for cover, returning fire with precision. The box truck's doors burst open, revealing armed guards with rifles. Ethan's first shot rang out, striking the engine block of the SUV. It exploded in a burst of flames, forcing Ross and Daniels to dive for cover. "Welcome to the party," Ethan muttered. On the canyon floor, chaos reigned. Tyler moved beside Claire, laying down cover fire. Rex darted between boulders, low to the ground, every motion precise. Bullets ricocheted off stone, sending sharp fragments of rock flying. Suddenly, amid the smoke and shouting, Daniels grabbed a small figure, a boy no older than 10, who had been cowering near the box truck. The child's face was streaked with dirt and tears, his shirt marked with the logo of the warehouse company. "That's Miguel," Claire gasped. "He's the guard's son. They must have brought him to keep quiet." Daniels pressed a gun to the boy's head, screaming, "Back off, or he dies." His eyes were wild, sweat dripping down his temples. Years of corruption had crumbled into sheer panic. Ethan adjusted his scope, heartbeat steady. He could see Daniels clearly now, his hand trembling, his stance unsteady. But one wrong shot could kill the boy. Before he could fire, Rex moved. The shepherd bolted from behind cover, sprinting through the dust and bullets. "Rex, no!" Tyler shouted, but the dog was already airborne. He slammed into Daniel's arm, knocking the pistol wide. The boy dropped to the ground, scrambling away. Daniels stumbled backward, cursing. Tyler rushed forward, tackling him hard, pinning him against the canyon wall. The lieutenant fought back, but Tyler's rage was pure and focused. "This is for every name you sold," he growled, slamming Daniel's wrist until the gun clattered to the dirt. Across the canyon, Kane Ross rose from behind the wrecked SUV, drawing a pistol. Ethan's crosshairs centered on his weapon. He squeezed the trigger. One clean shot. The bullet shattered Ross's gun, spinning it from his hand. "Now!" Aaron's voice thundered through the radio. DEA agents swarmed in, surrounding the remaining serpents. Within minutes, the gunfire faded, replaced by shouted commands and the click of handcuffs. Ross lay face down in the dust, his black suit torn, blood seeping from a grazed shoulder. Daniels was dragged away, screaming, his threats dissolving into incoherent rage. Ethan climbed down from the ridge, boots crunching over rock and brass shells. The air smelled of gunpowder and smoke, the echoes of battle fading into the wind. Claire met him halfway, a faint smile on her soot-streaked face. "Nice shot." "Lucky," Ethan replied, though they both knew better. Tyler knelt beside Rex, running a trembling hand through the dog's fur. "You stupid, brave bastard," he whispered, tears stinging his eyes. Rex licked his palm, tail thumping weakly. Aaron approached, removing his headset. "It's over," he said quietly. "Ross, Daniels, the serpents, they're all finished." Ethan looked out across the canyon, where the dust settled over the wreckage like snow. "No," he said softly. "It's never over. But for now, it's enough." The wind howled through Coyote Canyon, carrying with it the scent of victory and ashes. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something almost foreign in his chest, peace that didn't feel like surrender. The first light over the Bradshaw Mountains came slow and golden, washing away the ashes of war. The canyon was quiet now. Smoke still curled in the air where the battle had raged, its scent mixing with desert sage and dust. The wind, once thick with gunfire, now carried only silence, the kind that comes after too much noise, too much loss. Ethan Hawk Grayson stood at the edge of the ridge overlooking Coyote Canyon, hands in the pockets of his weathered leather jacket. The sun caught the silver threads in his dark hair, glinting like scars of light. His face was lined, not from age but from the weight of knowing what men could do when pushed too far. Below him, the DEA teams were packing up their black trucks, rolling through the canyon floor, collecting evidence, bodies, and weapons. It was over. For now. A few yards behind him, Tyler Brooks was sitting on the tailgate of a government vehicle, his left arm in a sling, his uniform freshly pressed but already smudged with dust. He was still pale from the fight, but there was a calm in his expression that hadn't been there before. Rex sat beside him, tail thumping lazily against the dirt, tongue lolling from exhaustion. The German shepherd's coat shimmered in the morning sun, patches of fur still shaved from where the wounds had been stitched. A silver medal hung loosely from his collar, gleaming with every rise of his chest. Claire Mitchell walked toward them, her ranger uniform neat for the first time in days. The brim of her hat cast a soft shadow over her hazel eyes. She carried a clipboard, though the way she looked at it suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. The official report says mutual cooperation between local and federal agencies, she said dryly. Funny I didn't see that line in the middle of the shootout, Tyler smirked. They'll write it how they want. They always do. Claire smiled faintly, then crouched to rub Rex's ear. You hear that, hero? You're federal property now. Rex gave a low huff, closing his eyes as if unimpressed with the promotion. Ethan turned, walking down the slope toward them. He looked out of place among the uniforms, the solitary figure in black leather and faded denim. The kind of man who didn't belong to the system, only to his own code. Aaron Brooks, Tyler's older brother, stood nearby speaking with a group of agents. He caught sight of Ethan and approached, his expression measured, respectful. Grayson, Aaron said, extending his hand. The department wants me to tell you they're grateful. What you did up there. Ethan shook his head before the man could finish. Don't. You and I both know gratitude fades faster than footprints in sand. Aaron hesitated, then nodded. You're right. But justice doesn't. Ethan's gaze drifted back to the horizon. Justice isn't something you hand out. It's something you hold on to, even when it burns your fingers. There was a long pause before Aaron quietly said, We could use men like you. DEA, consulting role, flexible hours. You'd be making a difference. Ethan smiled faintly, almost sadly. I've made my difference, Agent Brooks. Sometimes the best way to protect peace is to step away before it breaks you. Aaron exhaled, realizing there would be no convincing him. At least stay for the ceremony. Tyler's getting the medal he deserves. Ethan's eyes softened as he looked at the younger Brooks, laughing quietly with Claire and Rex. He doesn't need me there. He's already got something better than medals. A black SUV approached from down the road. A man in a dark suit stepped out. Deputy Director Thomas Keller, late 50s, the kind of bureaucrat who had learned to command rooms without ever raising his voice. His grey hair was slicked back, his tailored suit perfectly pressed despite the dust. Behind his steel-rimmed glasses were eyes sharp as ice. Gentlemen, he greeted smoothly. I've been authorized by the Department of Justice to express the nation's appreciation for the successful dismantling of the Crimson Serpents organization. Aaron straightened, offering a crisp salute. Thank you, sir. Keller's gaze shifted to Tyler. Officer Brooks, your courage under fire saved countless lives. You are hereby reinstated with full honors and will receive the Medal of Valor at next week's ceremony in Washington. Tyler rose, shaking Keller's hand firmly. Just doing my job, sir. Keller smiled. If every man did his job with your integrity, we'd have far fewer of these messes. Then he looked down at Rex, who stared up at him with calm intelligence. And our four-legged hero, Sergeant Rex, will receive the K-9 Valor Medal for bravery. You've earned your steak dinners, boy. Rex barked once, tail sweeping the dirt. Claire laughed, the sound bright and welcome after so much darkness. Keller turned to her next. Ranger Mitchell, your role in supporting this operation did not go unnoticed. The governor's office has approved your appointment as director of the Bradshaw Wildlife Rescue Center. Claire blinked, clearly caught off guard. Director? Effective immediately, Keller confirmed. Arizona needs more people who understand both wilderness and discipline. She smiled, tipping her hat. Guess I'll have to learn paperwork after all. Keller nodded once more before turning to leave. As his convoy disappeared down the road, the group was left in a quiet lull that felt strangely peaceful. The kind of peace that didn't erase what had happened, but accepted it. Tyler looked at Ethan, a question in his eyes. "You're really not staying?" Ethan tightened the strap of his duffel bag. "I'm not made for ceremonies, kid. Never was." Claire crossed her arms. "Where will you go?" He glanced toward the horizon where the desert stretched endless and red. "Doesn't matter. The road always knows where it needs to take me." Tyler stepped forward, extending his hand. "For what it's worth, you saved my life. Twice." Ethan clasped his hand firmly. "Make it count. That's how you repay it." Rex rose, limping slightly as he approached Ethan. The shepherd pressed his head against the man's leg, eyes closing. Ethan crouched, scratching behind his ear one last time. "You keep them safe, soldier." Rex gave a soft whine, tail wagging slowly. It was as if he understood that this was goodbye. Claire watched quietly as Ethan walked toward his Harley parked near the road. The bike gleamed dully under the rising sun, old, battle-worn, yet alive. He swung a leg over the seat and paused, glancing back one last time. The wind caught his words as he spoke, low but clear. Justice doesn't need applause. It just needs someone who won't look away. The engine roared to life, echoing through the canyon like thunder rolling away from a storm. Dust rose behind him as he rode down the winding road, the red sun at his back. As his figure vanished into the desert, Tyler stood silently beside Claire and Aaron. The world seemed to hold its breath for a moment, then, slowly, the day began again. For the first time in a long while, Prescott Valley felt alive. Weeks passed, and with them came the first rains of the season. The desert that had once burned with fire and gunpowder now shimmered under a thin veil of mist. Patches of green broke through the red soil, small blades of life daring to rise where smoke had once ruled. The Bradshaw Mountains stood solemn under grey clouds, their peaks wrapped in silence that felt, for the first time in months, like peace. Down in Prescott Valley, the town had begun to breathe again. The sound of hammers and saws replaced sirens. People talked in calm voices at the diner. The sheriff's office no longer carried the smell of fear. The storm had passed, not just in the sky, but in the hearts of those who had endured it. Tyler Brooks stood on the crest of a hill overlooking the town. The wind tugged at his uniform jacket, the new Medal of Valor gleaming faintly on his chest. His face still bore the faint lines of exhaustion, but his eyes were steady now, no longer haunted. His short blonde hair was neatly cut, his posture tall and calm. He looked every bit the officer he was meant to be, one who had crawled through darkness and found his way out. Beside him stood Claire Mitchell, her ranger hat pulled low against the drizzle. Her tan jacket bore the fresh insignia of her new post, director of the Bradshaw Wildlife Rescue Center. She had traded the rifle on her shoulder for a radio and clipboard, but there was still the same strength in her stance, the quiet confidence of a woman who had faced chaos and refused to bow to it. The wind lifted a few loose strands of her chestnut hair as she gazed out across the valley. Rex sat between them, his fur sleek from a recent brushing, his collar polished so the engraved medal caught the faint light. The dog's gaze was alert but calm, his ears twitching at every whisper of wind. He had grown more watchful since the fight, more protective of the two humans beside him, as if some part of him understood that his pack had changed forever. They stood together in silence, the kind that spoke more than words could. From this hilltop, the world looked both small and infinite, the roads curling like veins through the valley, the rain painting everything new again. Tyler exhaled, the breath turning to mist. "Hard to believe it's only been a few weeks," he said quietly. "Feels like a lifetime." Claire nodded. "You don't walk away from something like that the same person." He gave a small, wry smile. No. You either come back broken, or you come back better. Rex gave a soft chuff, as if adding his own opinion. Claire laughed lightly, bending to scratch behind his ear. Or maybe dogs don't think about it at all. They just live. Tyler's gaze drifted toward the far horizon, where the road stretched westward in a line of dust and red clay. The sound reached them, then faint at first, then growing stronger, the deep, familiar rumble of a Harley engine. Claire turned toward it, her eyes narrowing. "That's him," she said. Down below, the figure of Ethan Hawk Grayson appeared, riding his weathered Harley along the winding road that cut through the valley. The rain had left the ground glistening, and the tires kicked up thin trails of mud as he rode. He wore the same black leather jacket scorched from battle, a duffel strapped to the back of the bike. The rising sun broke through the clouds behind him, setting his silhouette in gold. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Tyler watched, hands resting on his belt, a quiet respect in his eyes. "He could have stayed," he said. Claire shook her head gently. "Men like him don't stay. The world needs them to move, even when they deserve rest." Rex barked once, sharp and clear, tail wagging as if to salute. Ethan's figure grew smaller as the Harley climbed a ridge, the rumble echoing across the valley like a heartbeat fading into distance. Claire's voice softened. "He's going to find his." Quiet again, but what he leaves behind is louder than any engine. Tyler turned toward her. "Faith? Faith," she said simply. "In people. In second chances." The wind carried the scent of wet earth and pine sap. A hawk cried somewhere above, circling the open sky before gliding out toward the sun. Claire looked up at it, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I guess even the sky remembers him," she murmured. Tyler chuckled softly. "Maybe it does." He looked down at Rex, who was still staring at the disappearing trail, ears perked, body still as stone. "He'll miss him." "So will we," Claire said. They stood there a while longer, the rain easing into a fine mist that glistened on their faces. The valley below shimmered under a pale, light fields washed clean, roofs shining wet, rivers swelling with new water. It was the kind of morning that promised not perfection, but renewal. Finally, Tyler said, "You think he'll come back?" Claire tilted her head, considering. "Maybe not here, but somewhere, someday, when someone needs him again." Rex looked up at her, gave a small bark, and wagged his tail as though in agreement. They all turned their eyes toward the horizon, where Ethan's motorcycle had vanished. The red road curved into the distance, framed by the wide, unbroken expanse of Arizona desert. The light shifted, golden now, the storm breaking into a new day. Claire took a deep breath of the clean air and whispered, almost to herself, "Even if the dark returns, that light will always find its way home." Rex barked once more, his voice echoing through the open hills. The sound of the Harley's engine faded completely then, leaving behind only the hush of wind and the gentle rhythm of rain on stone. And in that silence, real, living silence, Prescott Valley found peace again. In the end, this story reminds us that miracles often come disguised as ordinary people, those who choose compassion over comfort and courage over fear. Just as Ethan found light again in the darkest valley, we too can believe that God's grace still works quietly through the hands of those who care. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that faith still moves mountains. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of hope and redemption, and may God bless and protect everyone watching today.